With the country's new leader elected, South Korea is resuming top-level diplomacy. President Lee Jae-myung held a series of phone talks with foreign leaders, and he is slated to attend the G7 summit. For more details on this, we have our Kim Bo-kyoung here in studio. Good evening, Bo-kyoung.
Hi, Dami.
So, Bo-kyoung, why don't we start with all the phone calls that President Lee had this week?
All right, Tammy. Well, as we saw in Jung-min's report, President Lee held his third phone call with his Chinese President Xi Jinping, where he asked China to play a constructive role in denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and invited him to attend the APEC summit that is going to be held here in November. Now, this followed phone calls with U.S. President Trump on June 6th and with Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba on the 9th. The call with Trump was reportedly conducted in a friendly way where they reaffirmed the importance of the Korea-U.S. alliance. Some expressed concerns over the White House not having issued any formal comment, nor Trump mentioning the call on his social media platform. But an expert I talked to said there was not much to worry about, as Washington could be just taking a cautious approach to better understand Lee's pragmatic diplomacy. Now, in terms of Ishiba, they agreed to build a stronger, more mature bilateral relationship and affirm their commitment to trilateral cooperation with the U.S.
Well, Bo-kyoung, first things first, President Lee Jae-myung is set to attend the G7 summit in Canada that is about to take place on June 5th to the 17th as an observer. Now, that will be his debut on the global diplomatic stage, right?
Exactly. His trip to the G7 summit comes less than 2 weeks since his inauguration, and the G7 summit is going to take place in Alberta, and he is going there at Canada's invitation. Now, attending a G7 summit is going to be quite symbolic for South Korea, as it signals the resumption of Korea's top-level diplomacy that had been stalled over the past 6 months following the martial law crisis.
The attendance basically means that we are going to normalize things and actively engage on the diplomatic stage, though we have had a diplomatic vacuum for the past 6 months.
Now, Bo-kyoung, with Trump also attending the G7 summit in Canada, is there any possibility of bilateral talks taking place between President Lee and Trump?
Well, Tommy, there's always possibility, and if they get a chance to see each other, it will be the first time in 7 months since the leaders of Seoul and Washington last met in person when former President Yoon Suk-yeol and former U.S. President Joe Biden met each other at the APEC summit held in Peru last November.
Right.
But we need to note that the G7 summit is a multilateral setting and that South Korea has been invited as an observer, as you already said. In this kind of setting, it could be quite difficult to have bilateral talks. Also, according to an expert I talked to, it could be better for us to talk about such challenging issues later on after being fully prepared and when proper talks can be held.
It's not a good idea that we will talk about these very upcoming and very daunting issues and challenges for South Korea, including tariff or cost sharing, and we have to be prepared. We have to have our own the strategy first, and then we will have a very detailed way to prepare all this meeting.
Right, lots of pending issues to deal with the U.S. Now, in the meantime, how about Japan? I mean, if bilateral talks do take place, what can we expect?
Well, as Lee and Ishiba have already expressed their hope to meet in person at an early date during their recent phone talks, there is also a possibility of them having a summit. In terms of Japan, there are still concerns over how President Lee will shape his approach toward Tokyo, as he had taken a confrontational stance regarding historical and territorial disputes. Despite such worries, the expert says Seoul will maintain a favorable relationship with Tokyo, largely because the two countries have the same issues to deal with.
Japan is not just a country that helps us keep countries like China and North Korea in check, but also a country like South Korea that is going through some overbearing behavior from the US, and therefore we need to work together in dealing with this.
And maybe that is where we can, see a glimpse of President Lee Jae-myung's so-called pragmatic diplomacy, separating issues of cooperation from those of the past.
Right.
All right, Bo-kyoung, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.